Ben approached, running his scanner over the markings. The computer can't translate it, but the patterns match fragments found in other ancient sites. If the legends are true, this could be human writing. The door remained sealed despite their efforts until Davis placed his hand on a panel beside it out of frustration. To everyone's shock, lights suddenly flickered to life along the corridor, and the door slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond lay a vast chamber filled with rows of metallic pods, each large enough to hold a body. Most importantly, they weren't empty. Through the frosted covering of the nearest pod, Davis could make out a face, remarkably similar to his own species, but different in subtle ways. The being inside appeared to be sleeping. "Are they alive?" Anna whispered. Ben checked his scanner, eyes widening. Minimal life signs. But yes, they're in some form of suspended animation. As they moved cautiously through the room, Davis accidentally brushed against a console. The entire chamber hummed to life, displays activating with cascades of those strange symbols. A mechanical voice spoke, startling them all. It used words none of them recognized, then paused as if processing. When it spoke again, it used the common trade language of the galaxy, though with an odd accent. Reanimation protocol initiated. Emergency awakening sequence authorized. Threat assessment required. One of the pods began to glow, its covering becoming transparent. The fog within dissipated, revealing a tall figure in some kind of uniform. The pod opened with a hydraulic sigh. The being inside opened its eyes, startlingly blue, and sat up slowly, looking directly at Davis. "I am Captain Robert Miller, Earth Defense Force," it said in a rough voice. "How long have we been asleep? And who exactly are you?" Davis found himself unable to speak for a moment, the implications overwhelming him. The humans weren't myths after all. And if the legends about their power were true, the war that had consumed the galaxy for centuries might soon come to an end. Captain Miller's movements were stiff as he climbed out of the stasis pod, his muscles adjusting to use after thousands of years of dormancy. He stood taller than Davis by nearly a head, with broad shoulders and a physique that suggested significant strength despite his time in suspension. "You still haven't answered my question," Miller said, his voice gaining strength with each word. "How long have we been asleep?" Davis cleared his throat. "We don't know exactly. Our historical records go back about 4,000 years, and humans are mentioned only in our oldest legends." Miller's face paled. 4,000. At minimum. He steadied himself against the pod. The emergency protocols were only supposed to last 500 years at most. Something must have gone wrong with the awakening sequence, Ben suggested, fascinated by the living myth before him. Miller walked unsteadily to a nearby console and placed his palm on its surface. Information began streaming across the screens too quickly for the others to follow. His expression grew increasingly troubled. System malfunction. The primary awakening algorithms were damaged in what appears to be a meteor strike about 3,200 years ago. He looked up. "We've been asleep for 10,437 years." The number hung in the air like a physical weight. "Everyone I knew," Miller whispered, then steeled himself. "What about the rest of the human outposts?" There were 17 major facilities like this one scattered throughout this sector of the galaxy. "We don't know of any others," Davis admitted. "This is the first concrete evidence we've found that humans were more than just stories." Miller tapped more commands into the console. "Your arrival has triggered emergency protocols. The system is sending awakening signals to all other facilities. If any survived, they'll begin reanimation procedures for their occupants." He turned to face the conclave team. "Now tell me who you are and what's happening out there." The emergency awakening only activates if the system detects large-scale military operations in the sector. Davis explained the centuries-long war between the Conclave and the Dominion. As he spoke, Miller called up star maps on the displays, comparing them to his ancient data. His brow furrowed as he saw how the territory had changed, new species, new alliances, new technologies built upon fragments of human knowledge. Your war, Miller said when Davis finished, it's being fought with pale imitations of our technology. Both sides are using weapons systems based on human designs, but they're crude, inefficient. He pointed to an image of a Dominion battlecruiser. This ship's power core is based on our Mark IA fusion reactor, but they've completely misunderstood the containment principles. Is that why the Dominion ships sometimes experience core breaches? Anna asked. Miller nodded. They're lucky they only lose ships. With those design flaws, they could lose entire star systems. The console chimed, drawing Miller's attention. I'm receiving confirmation signals. 7 other facilities are responding. The others may be destroyed or too damaged to activate. What happens now? Davis asked. Now. Miller's expression hardened. Now we wake up the fleet. He led them deeper into the facility, past more stasis chambers holding hundreds of sleeping humans. They entered a massive hangar bay where sleek ships of various sizes floated in suspension fields. These are just the support vessels, Miller explained. The main battle group is in orbit around the gas giant, camouflaged within its rings. Once the crews are revived, we'll have enough firepower to end your war in a day. Davis felt a mixture of hope and unease. You would help us? Why? Miller's eyes grew distant. Because humans know the cost of war better than anyone. Our civil war nearly destroyed us. We fought over resources, ideology, territory, tearing ourselves apart while wielding weapons that could shatter planets. In the end, both sides realized we'd gone too far. The remaining military leaders made a pact. We would put ourselves to sleep, let the wounds of the galaxy heal, and awaken only if needed to prevent others from repeating our mistakes. He turned to face Davis directly. Your Dominion is following the same path that led to our downfall. We won't let that happen again. A low rumble shook the facility as massive machinery activated. Throughout the complex, stasis pods began the awakening process. On monitors around them, similar scenes played out in the other responding facilities across the galaxy. Commander Davis, Miller said formally, I need to contact your leadership, and I need a full briefing on the current state of the conflict. Davis nodded, stunned by the rapid turn of events. Just days ago, the Conclave had been on the verge of defeat. Now they had awakened a power that made both sides in the current war seem like children playing with sticks. As they prepared to return to Davis's ship, Miller paused at a weapons locker. He entered a code and removed a small device that fit in his palm. What's that? Anna asked. Insurance, Miller replied grimly. The activation key for the Flash protocol. A last resort we hoped never to use. It can disable all human-derived technology in a radius of several light years. Would that include our ships? Davis asked. Miller nodded. Everything. Let's hope we don't need it. Across the galaxy, long dormant facilities stirred to life. Deep beneath the crust of a frozen world, Admiral Jane Wilson opened her eyes for the first time in millennia. As the highest-ranking human officer still in stasis, the system had prioritized her revival. The medical technicians, themselves only awakened hours earlier, helped her from the pod. Status report, she demanded, her voice hoarse from disuse. 7 facilities reporting successful activation, Admiral, said a young lieutenant. We've lost contact with the other 10. We're still assessing total available forces, but preliminary numbers suggest 42 capital ships, over 100 support vessels, and approximately 15,000 personnel. Wilson nodded, processing the information. Once, the human fleet had numbered in the thousands of ships with millions of crew. Now they were reduced to a skeleton force. And our situation? Why were we awakened? The emergency protocols detected large-scale warfare in multiple sectors. Additionally, Facility 7 was manually activated by a group of non-humans. Wilson raised an eyebrow. Show me. The briefing room's walls transformed into display screens showing Davis and his team alongside Captain Miller. Wilson watched the recorded conversation with interest. "So the galaxy is at war again," she said quietly. "And they're using our technology to do it. Badly." She spent the next hours absorbing information from the facility's databases. The picture that emerged troubled her deeply. The Conclave and Dominion had been fighting for nearly 2 centuries, with the Dominion pushing steadily toward victory through technological superiority. Both sides had reverse-engineered fragments of human technology left behind after their disappearance, but the Dominion had been more successful in weaponizing their discoveries. "Admiral," called an officer, "we're receiving a direct communication request from Captain Miller." Wilson straightened her uniform, the same one she had worn 10,000 years ago, and nodded. "Put him through." Miller's face appeared on the main screen. "Admiral Wilson, it's good to see you survived." "You as well, Captain. I've reviewed your initial report. Your assessment." The Conclave representatives appear trustworthy, Admiral. They're fighting for their survival against an expanding power that reminds me too much of our own history. I've seen the Dominion weapon schematics. They're crude adaptations of our planet cracker designs. Wilson's expression darkened. The planet crackers had been what finally pushed humans to enact the hibernation protocols. Weapons so destructive, they threatened the stability of the galaxy itself. "I'm dispatching the cruiser Artemis to your position," Wilson decided. "We need to establish contact with this Conclave's leadership immediately. In the meantime, continue gathering intelligence on Dominion capabilities." "Yes, Admiral." "There's one more thing." The Conclave commander mentioned a Dominion research facility in the Cygnus sector. "They believe the Dominion is close to activating what they call a star killer." Wilson's blood ran cold. A nova inducer. They couldn't possibly have salvaged that technology. The specifications matched the prototype designs. "Admiral." Wilson ended the transmission and turned to her staff. "Priority alert to all facilities. Accelerate revival protocols for tactical personnel. And prepare my ship. We need to reach the Cygnus sector before that weapon becomes operational." Within days, human vessels began emerging from their hidden docks and secret bases. The Dominion was the first to detect them, unusual energy signatures that matched no known configuration. A patrol fleet near the borders of Conclave space encountered 3 human frigates. Unidentified vessels, called the Dominion Commander, "You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction." The response came in the form of a system-wide transmission. "This is Lieutenant Walker of the Earth Defense Force. Your forces are engaged in unauthorized use of human military technology and are ordered to stand down immediately." The Dominion commander laughed. "Earth, that's a myth. You have 10 seconds to surrender before we open fire." Walker sighed. They never listened the first time. The Dominion ships fired their main weapons, energy beams that could slice through standard Conclave shields like paper. The human vessels didn't attempt to evade. Instead, the beams simply dissipated against invisible barriers, not even causing shields to flare visibly. "Targeting systems locked," reported Walker's weapons officer. "Non-lethal protocols. Confirmed. Disable only." Thin blue pulses erupted from the human ships. Where they touched the Dominion vessels, systems failed instantly. Engines died, weapons went offline, and life support switched to emergency backup. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Dominion patrol was drifting helplessly. Walker opened a channel to the disabled ships. "As I was saying, you are ordered to stand down. Rescue vessels will arrive to retrieve your crews shortly. Consider this a demonstration." Word of the encounter spread rapidly through both Conclave and Dominion networks. The humans, the legendary architects of ancient myths, had returned, and they were far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The news of the patrol fleet's defeat reached Dominion High Command like a thunderbolt. General Marcus paced the war room, surrounded by his advisors and intelligence officers. The holographic display showed footage of the encounter, their most advanced ships rendered helpless in seconds. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Those ships absorbed our heaviest weapons without visible shields. Our intelligence suggested the Conclave had no such technology. They didn't, sir, replied the Chief Intelligence Officer. These aren't Conclave vessels. The design and energy signatures match nothing in our database. But he hesitated. Speak freely, Marcus ordered. They match fragments of designs found in our oldest archaeological sites, the ones attributed to the architects. A heavy silence fell over the room. Every spacefaring species knew the legends of the architects, the mysterious precursors who had supposedly seeded the galaxy with the foundations of advanced technology before vanishing. Are you suggesting these are the actual architects returning? Marcus asked incredulously. Sir, they identify themselves as the Earth Defense Force. According to ancient texts, Earth was the homeworld of a species called humans. Many scholars believe humans were the architects. Marcus turned to his military advisors. Options. We should gather more information before committing to action, suggested his second-in-command. If these are truly the architects, the humans, we may be dealing with technology thousands of years beyond our own. Or, countered another officer, this could be an elaborate Conclave deception. A few advanced prototype ships and some historical references to intimidate us. Marcus nodded. Deploy reconnaissance drones to monitor their movements, and accelerate Project Sunforge. If we're facing a superior force, we'll need every advantage. Across the divide, the Conclave leadership welcomed Captain Miller and Commander Davis with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The Grand Council chamber fell silent as Miller walked to the center of the room, his human physiology drawing curious stares. I bring greetings from Admiral Wilson of the Earth Defense Force, Miller began. We have observed your conflict and determined that intervention is necessary to prevent further misuse of human technology. The Conclave Chancellor leaned forward. We welcome your assistance against Dominion aggression, Captain Miller. But I must ask, where have your people been all this time? Why return now? Miller's expression remained neutral. We removed ourselves from galactic affairs after our own devastating civil war. We entered stasis, intending to sleep for centuries, while the galaxy healed from our conflicts. Something malfunctioned. We slept for millennia instead. And now you've returned to help us. The Chancellor sounded hopeful but wary. We've returned to end a war being fought with corrupted versions of our own weapons, Miller corrected. Admiral Wilson proposes an immediate ceasefire while we negotiate a permanent peace. Murmurs spread through the council. A peace enforced by the legendary architects seemed too good to be true. The Dominion will never agree, said one council member. They've pushed for total victory for decades. Miller smiled thinly. They'll agree. A demonstration has already been provided to one of their patrol fleets. The council was shown footage of the encounter. Gasps and exclamations filled the chamber as they watched Dominion warships. The same vessels that had terrorized their borders for years, neutralized without effort. We request a neutral meeting ground for peace talks, Miller continued. Admiral Wilson will arrive within 3 days to oversee negotiations. While the Conclave celebrated their apparent salvation, human ships continued emerging throughout the galaxy. On the edge of Dominion space, the Artemis, a sleek dreadnought twice the size of the largest Dominion battleship, appeared suddenly in orbit around an uninhabited world. Admiral Wilson stood on the bridge, watching as her fleet assembled. Sensor reports streamed in, mapping Dominion and Conclave territories, fleet positions, and weapon capabilities. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, noted her tactical officer. They've been building on fragments without understanding the underlying principles. Wilson nodded, which makes them all the more dangerous. Like children playing with fusion cores. Her communications officer turned from his station. Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the Cygnus sector. It matches the signature of a nova inducer in early activation stages. Wilson's expression hardened. How long until full activation? At current power levels, approximately 72 hours. Set course immediately. Alert all available ships to converge on those coordinates. As the Artemis jumped to faster-than-light speed, Wilson studied the star charts. The Dominion was indeed following the same path that had led to humanity's downfall, escalating weapon technology without understanding the consequences. This time, she murmured, we'll stop it before it begins. The Dominion's Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as General Marcus prepared to meet the human delegation. His highest-ranking officers and the Dominion's political leadership gathered in anxious clusters, whispering theories about these beings from legend. They've agreed to peace talks, Marcus informed the Supreme Leader, a tall, severe individual who rarely left the Dominion's fortress capital. But I believe it's merely a delaying tactic. Our intelligence suggests they have only a fraction of the forces they once commanded. The Supreme Leader nodded slowly. And Project Sunforge. Accelerated as ordered. The device will be ready in 48 hours. Good. We will appear to negotiate in good faith while preparing our response. These humans may have impressive technology, but they are few. We are many. The massive doors at the end of the hall swung open. Admiral Wilson entered, flanked by Captain Miller and a small security detail. The humans moved with confidence, seemingly unconcerned by being so deeply in enemy territory. Wilson wore a simple dark uniform with minimal insignia, no gaudy medals or elaborate rank markers like those favored by Dominion officers. Yet her presence commanded the room immediately. Thank you for agreeing to these discussions, Wilson began without preamble. I am Admiral Jane Wilson of the Earth Defense Force. We propose an immediate cessation of hostilities between the Dominion and the Conclave. The Supreme Leader stepped forward. We welcome dialogue, Admiral. But the Dominion has invested generations in this conflict. What do you offer in exchange for peace? Wilson's expression remained neutral. Knowledge. The technology both sides have been using is based on human designs, incomplete fragments you've cobbled together without understanding the fundamental principles. We offer to help both sides develop safe, sustainable technologies instead of the weapons you've been misusing. Marcus couldn't help but notice how Wilson emphasized safe. Did they know about Project Sunforge? An intriguing offer, the Supreme Leader replied. But perhaps we should discuss why your species abandoned the galaxy, only to return when the Dominion stands on the verge of victory. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. We didn't abandon the galaxy. We removed ourselves from it after nearly destroying it. The weapons you've been developing are pale shadows of the devices that forced us into hibernation. We've returned because you're approaching the same catastrophic threshold we once crossed. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared between them, showing the sickness sector. For instance, your Project Sunforge. You believe you're building a weapon to destabilize stars in enemy systems. What you're actually creating is a device that will tear a hole in spacetime, potentially destroying everything within 500 light-years, including 27 of your own core worlds. A murmur of shock rippled through the assembly. The Supreme Leader's face darkened. Your intelligence is impressive but flawed. Our scientists assure me. Your scientists, Wilson interrupted calmly, are working from incomplete information. They found fragments of our Nova inducer technology, but lack the containment principles that made it viable. I can prove this mathematically, if you wish. Before the Supreme Leader could respond, a Dominion officer rushed into the hall and whispered urgently to General Marcus. His face paled. Supreme Leader, we've just received word. The Cygnus facility reports unexpected power fluctuations in the Sunforge prototype. They're having difficulty maintaining containment. Wilson didn't appear surprised. As predicted, the reaction is becoming self-sustaining prematurely. She turned to Miller. Captain, deploy the suppression team. Miller touched a small device on his wrist. Team Theta, execute Operation Dampener. The Supreme Leader stepped forward angrily. What have you done? Saved your empire, Wilson replied evenly. 3 human vessels have been monitoring your facility since we detected the initial power signature. They're now deploying technology to safely neutralize the reaction before it destroys half your territory. On the massive view screen that dominated one wall of the hall, They watched as 3 sleek human ships surrounded a Dominion space station. Blue energy beams connected the vessels, creating a triangular field that enveloped the station. Within seconds, the pulsing red core visible at the station's center dimmed and stabilized. "The situation is contained," Miller reported. "No casualties." Wilson turned back to the stunned Dominion leadership. "This is why we've returned. Not to conquer, not to take sides, but to prevent you from repeating our mistakes." She paused. "Now shall we discuss actual peace terms?" The Supreme Leader stared at the screen showing his neutralized superweapon. Then at this human who had so easily countered their greatest technological achievement. "I believe," he said slowly, "we should listen to what the Admiral has to say." 1 year had passed since the signing of the Galactic Accord. The former warring factions now worked alongside human advisors, rebuilding what centuries of conflict had destroyed. On the newly established Galactic Council Station, representatives from the Conclave, Dominion, and a dozen smaller powers gathered to mark the anniversary. Commander Davis, now promoted to Admiral, walked through the Grand Council chamber where delegates mingled peacefully. He still found it hard to believe how quickly things had changed. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering, built in mere months using technology neither the Conclave nor Dominion fully understood. "Quite the transformation," said Captain Miller, appearing at his side. The human officer had aged little in the past year, a reminder of the advanced medical technology his species possessed. "I never thought I'd see Dominion and Conclave officers sharing drinks," Davis admitted. "The war seemed endless." Miller nodded. "Humans thought the same about our own conflicts once. We learned the hard way that war only appears inevitable until someone finds the courage to choose peace." They moved to a viewport overlooking the massive shipyards below. There, vessels from all factions underwent modifications under human supervision. Weapons systems recalibrated, dangerous power cores replaced with safer designs. "How much of your fleet has awakened now?" Davis asked. "Just enough," Miller replied carefully. "About 20% of our preserve forces. Admiral Wilson believes that's sufficient for our peacekeeping role." Davis had learned that humans were selective with information, transparent about some things, deliberately vague about others. They never lied, but they didn't tell the whole truth either. "And the rest will remain in stasis. For now." Miller guided them away from curious ears. "There's something you should know, Davis, something few outside our command structure are aware of." They entered a secure meeting room where Admiral Wilson waited. She looked up from a holographic display as they entered, her expression serious. "Admiral Davis," she greeted him. "Thank you for coming. Captain Miller believes you've earned our trust, and I agree." The display shifted to show a map of the galaxy with several regions marked in red. "Our decision to enter hibernation wasn't solely because of our civil war," Wilson explained. "That was part of it, but there was another factor. Something we encountered at the edge of explored space." The display zoomed in on one of the red zones. Davis squinted at the strange readings. "What am I looking at?" "We call them the void entities," Wilson said grimly. "Non-corporeal beings that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Our first encounters with them triggered our civil war. Some human factions wanted to communicate, others to destroy them, others to worship them." Miller continued, "They influenced our minds, turned us against each other. By the time we realized what was happening, billions had died, and our civilization was fractured." "The hibernation plan was twofold," Wilson added. "First, to let the galaxy recover from our war. Second, to wait until the void entities retreated from the spiral arm of the galaxy, which our calculations suggested would take approximately 500 years. But you slept for over 10,000, Davis said, understanding dawning. "Are they gone?" Wilson shook her head. "Our long-range scouts have detected energy signatures consistent with void entity activity beyond the galactic rim. They're returning, or perhaps they never left. This is the real reason we're limiting how many humans we awaken. We need to maintain our reserves in case of full-scale return." Davis absorbed this information slowly. Does the Council know? No, Miller replied. And they can't. Not yet. The galaxy has just found peace after centuries of war. Telling them about a potential threat beyond comprehension would only cause panic. Wilson pulled up another display showing the modified defense grid now protecting major systems throughout Conclave and Dominion space. The technology we're implementing isn't just to prevent you from destroying each other, she explained. The grid we're building can be reconfigured to detect and repel void entity incursions. We're preparing the galaxy's defenses without causing mass hysteria. Davis felt the weight of this secret. Why tell me? Because we need allies who understand both worlds, Wilson said simply. Humans who slept through millennia, and those who lived through recent history. You know these people, their fears and hopes, in ways we never can. Miller placed a hand on Davis's shoulder. We're asking you to help us prepare, quietly, carefully. The peace we've built needs to be strong enough to withstand what may come. Outside, celebrations continued as the diverse species of the galaxy embraced their new era of cooperation, unaware of the watchful eyes of human vessels positioned at the edge of charted space. There, silent sentinels monitored the darkness between stars for signs of ancient enemies. Davis looked back at the galactic map with its ominous red zones. How long do we have? Years, perhaps decades, Wilson answered honestly. Time enough to build our strength, if we're wise. The war that just ended may have been merely practice for what comes next. She shut down the display and straightened her uniform. But tonight, Admiral Davis, we celebrate peace. Tomorrow, we prepare for what lies beyond.